Everybody. I usually see you in the evening, and look, it's broad daylight, and here you are. Welcome to our very special discussion during the daytime with Laura Zifer Powell as we begin the month of March. All of it brought to you by Women in Apologetics. WIA exists to educate, equip, and encourage women to defend their faith in Christ with confidence as well as with grace. And we are so glad that you are with us today. So first things first, please let us know that you're here. Hop in the chat and just say hello to our wonderful moderators and our wonderful audience. If you and I haven't met yet, my name is Lori, and I am very, very excited to be with you today, especially when it means that I get to introduce a guest like today's guest, who's going to be talking to us and teaching us on what is a very, very important and very often overlooked topic in the church, especially during an election year. Later on in the show, we are going to be giving away a free registration to our 2024 WIA conference in Nashville, Tennessee. Now, if it happens to work out that you are unable to attend the conference this year, we're still going to give you the option to have 1 year access to a replay from one of our past conferences. But to be eligible, you have to do two things. The first thing you have to do is to hop into the chat and tell us why you're here with us today. What was it about this segment that we're doing that got your attention? Why are you watching this segment today? And you have to be present in the chat during the actual giveaway, which will be toward the end of the show. But don't worry, I'll make sure and come back between now and then to remind you of the giveaway so that you won't miss it. We are very excited to be featuring Laura Zifer Powell today because she is going to be one of our conference speakers. She's going to be one of our breakout speakers at our conference this fall in September in Nashville. So if you haven't had a chance to register for the conference just yet, please visit our conference webpage at womeninapologetics.com/2024 WIA CONF 2024 WIA conference. And you can register there. So Laura Powell is the founder of An Affair with Reason, and she serves as a Christian apologist, an Islam ministry specialist, and a senior writer here at Women in Apologetics. Since graduating from Duke University in 1998 and from Denver Seminary in 2004, she has ministered in almost 30 countries on 5 continents. Her passions include challenging people to think critically about what they believe. That's why we love her here. Leading others into a deep and abiding relationship with the Lord. We like that too. And fostering a biblical worldview that results in transformed lives and renewed spirits. She is everything that WIA is all about, and we are so lucky to have her. Her writing on apologetics, theology, and worldview can be found at laurazpowell.org. I know you're going to be interested in checking out her blog, so that is the address. That's a place where you can find her on the interwebs, laurazpowell.org. Welcome, Laura. Thank you so much for being our guest today. I am looking very forward to your talk. You and I have talked before. You know, I love the whole concept of making sure the church understands the biblical worldview toward progressive ideas and humanistic ideas and socialism in particular, because it's so popular among the next generation. So I'm so grateful that you're going to be talking about that with us today and helping us understand and think through biblically. And so I'm just going to turn it over to you, and I'll come back about halfway through to remind everybody about our giveaway. But in the meantime, it's all you.
Thank you so much, Lori. I just love having you as a part of our team. I'm really grateful for you. Well, let's jump into today's topic. Is Jesus a socialist? A lot of you might be wondering, why is Women in Apologetics talking about this topic? And at least part of the answer is that apologetics involves evaluating how well Christianity accounts for reality. And as Christians, we have to ask how we should think and live in light of what is true as well. And so this topic of socialism addresses both of those issues, and I hope you'll be able to see clearly why throughout this presentation. According to a 2019 YouGov poll, 70% of millennials say they would vote for a socialist. Now, millennials are now 27 to 42 years old. So we're not talking about just college students anymore. 70% of millennials would vote for a socialist. As of 2019, about 4 in 10 Americans think favorably of socialism. That's all Americans. And 47% would vote for a socialist for president of the United States. All indications are that these numbers would be even higher today. That was about 3 or 4 years ago that those polls were taken that I just cited. And of course, financial policy influences every area of our lives, and it is very much a significant worldview issue. So let's talk about what is socialism. First of all, what are we even talking about? Socialism is a political system as well as an economic system that is characterized by community ownership of the means of production rather than private ownership. Okay, so this means that a centralized government plans and controls the economy. In other words, it's not individuals or families or shareholders who own the businesses or the equipment for producing goods and services. It's the community as a whole that owns them, at least in theory. Okay, so everyone in theory is an equal owner of healthcare clinics, farms, markets, grocery stores, and any other business and industry. But in practice, no one voluntarily gives up their property or their business or their assets. And even if business owners did surrender their businesses to the community, someone has to be responsible to maintain it, right? So in reality, the government steps in and takes over. Now, this is far different, of course, from the free market where individuals decide what they need and what they want, which is in economic terms referred to as demand. And those who produce each good and service produce it according to the demand. So that's known as supply. Without supply and demand to determine how much of each good and service is produced and how much they will cost, the government makes these decisions. So in our brief time today, I want to make 2 main points about socialism. The first is that socialism is biblically unwarranted. And the second is that socialism does not produce good results in the real world. So let's start with main point number 1. Let's look at what the Bible says, beginning with the claims that people make to claim that the Bible supports socialism. Okay, and again, point number 1, which I'm hoping to show now, is that socialism is biblically unwarranted. So one passage, probably I would say the most commonly used passage that people bring up, certainly with me and as far as I've seen online and such, to claim that Jesus was a socialist is Acts chapter 2, and especially verses 42 to 47. This is where the believers had everything in common. So I'm going to go ahead and read these few verses to you. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. This is very different from modern socialism. This passage describes a voluntary giving to one another within a small community. This is not government imposed. That is a huge and critical difference between a free market and socialism. One is based on free trade, where people make free decisions about what they need, what they want, and what they will make. The other is imposed by force. So if you want the freedom to sell your possessions and give the money to other Christians, as was done in Acts chapter 2, then you want a free market economy. This passage also assumes that people owned private property, that they were able to keep their earned income, and that they were free to share it with fellow believers. And additionally, I think this is very important, there was accountability here within this community that the government simply cannot provide. The text says the Christians met together daily, so they knew the details of one another's lives. There was a ton of accountability in how they were living. Christians were not just giving their money to people who were sexually promiscuous, having children outside of marriage, doing drugs, promoting unbiblical beliefs, refusing to work. That was not happening. This was a community of committed followers of Jesus. The Apostle Paul had written, if anyone is not willing to work, let him not eat. That's in 2 Thessalonians 3:10. And in the early church, there was church discipline. It was a regular practice. It's a biblical practice. So those who disregarded the commands of the Lord were not rewarded. In fact, those who willfully put their own sexual preferences, for example, above the Lord, were told to leave the fellowship of believers. You can look at that in 1 Corinthians chapter 5. The U.S. government is not capable of providing this kind of accountability. And this makes all the difference between being helpful to those who need a hand in difficult times versus enabling and even incentivizing unbiblical and problematic behavior. Let's look at another example that people use in order to say Jesus was a socialist. In Matthew chapter 19, verses 16 to 30, this is where Jesus tells the rich young ruler to sell all his possessions. It's also recorded in Mark chapter 9. And so kind of a summary of this passage is that a rich young ruler came up to Jesus and asked him, Jesus, what good thing must I do to be saved? And Jesus told him to keep the commandments. The young man asked which commandments he should keep. Jesus named several. The man said he had kept those, and he wanted to know what he still lacked. Jesus replied, if you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions, give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. So does this mean that Christians today are to vote for the government to confiscate all the businesses and all the means of production to control the economy themselves? Not at all. This account ought to certainly challenge every Christian to consider whether or not their wealth is keeping them from going all in to follow Jesus. If it is, then you might be someone who Jesus would tell to give it away. He did not order everyone to give away all their money or all their belongings or anything like that. Although he did have a lot to say about money, and he certainly taught radical generosity. But this is key. Again, he always taught voluntary radical generosity. He never commanded government forces to seize people's properties or their possession on threat of imprisonment. He praised those who gave generously. And when people refused, like this rich young ruler actually did, he allowed them to walk away. Now, I know you'll probably be shocked to hear this, but when the government takes people's earned income, they don't send it to Women in Apologetics. They don't send it to Stand to Reason or Frank Turek or William Lane Craig. Christian ministries and resources only exist when Christians are able to give voluntarily. So those are some main passages that people use to claim that Jesus was a socialist. Let's look now at a few passages that socialists tend to avoid calling attention to, which indicate that Jesus likely would not be a socialist. Throughout the biblical accounts, people owned private property and they were free to use it as they pleased. Private ownership was not only assumed, it was actually affirmed as a good thing. And so I like to call people's attention to Acts chapter 5, the account of Ananias and Sapphira. So Ananias and Sapphira were a couple. They sold some of their property. They kept some of the profits for themselves, and they donated the rest to the church. But they lied and said they had donated the full amount of their property when really they had only donated a portion of it. And Peter called them out for lying. Peter said, Ananias, how is it that Satan has so filled your heart that you have lied to the Holy Spirit and have kept for yourself some of the money you received from the land, for the land? Didn't it belong to you before it was sold? And after it was sold, wasn't the money at your disposal? What made you think of doing such a thing? You have not lied just to human beings, but to God. Okay, so this passage affirms the ownership of private property. Peter says you were free to do whatever you wanted with it. What is condemned here is lying about what they did with their money in order to look good to others. There are plenty more examples, but the point is that the Bible doesn't condemn ownership of private property. Rather, it tells us how to steward our possessions well. The Bible also condemns envy, which is at the root of socialism. Most people who are drawn to socialism will tell you that it's because they want everyone to have the same amount of everything as anyone else has. They want everyone to have the same amount of money, the same amount of property, the same things as everyone else. The word of our day, which you have probably heard, is equity. We want everyone to have the same outcomes in all of life so that no one has more of anything than anyone else, because if someone else were to have more, then, someone else might feel bad. So at the root of this is greed and envy. And the Bible has plenty to say about that, including in the 10 Commandments when God said, you shall not covet in Exodus 20. And in Luke chapter 12, I actually had not, Luke chapter 12 had never really stood out to me. That it's this quick account that I'd recommend people look at, but I hadn't looked at it very much, or it hadn't stood out to me until I started studying this topic. But Jesus and his disciples are walking, and a man in the crowd says to Jesus, hey, Jesus, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. So he's basically saying, hey, Jesus, tell my brother to give me my fair share. Jesus did not reply as this man had hoped or expected. He did not reply by saying, yes, brother, share everything you have, make sure everybody gets the same amount, gets their fair share. That's not what Jesus did at all. He replied with a warning against greed and a speech about how this man should not be obsessed with material things. It's also significant that the means by which socialism is accomplished is actually government-sanctioned theft. Just because a majority is okay with something, that does not make it right, that does not make it a good thing. When government takes by force what you earned in order to give it to me or to someone else who didn't earn it, that is theft, even if a majority of sinners approve of it or voted for it. In contrast, when you voluntarily give what you earn to someone else, that's charity, it's generosity, and that is praiseworthy. So again, the voluntary component makes all the difference. Additionally, Jesus and the apostles commanded individuals to use their money wisely and generously, and this cannot be done under a socialist system. So the Apostle Paul, for example, wrote in 2 Corinthians 9:7, each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. Not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. Socialism precludes Christians from being able to obey this command. It's also significant that Jesus did not condemn the rich when he was talking to people who earned their wealth through their own hard work. He only warned and condemned the rich when he was talking to those who had extracted it from the people who had earned it. So when we read of Jesus' warnings and his condemnations with regard to money, we have to pay attention to where he was and who he was talking to. Jesus was tough on the wealthy when he was in the politically well-connected region of Judea and when he was in the politically tied towns of Tyre and Sidon, which operated more like socialism, whereby the political and the religious elite controlled the money. And yet Jesus omitted the lectures and the warnings about money when he was in areas where most of the wealth was created through labor and through commerce and even through investment. So socialism is biblically unwarranted from a theological standpoint. And that is the first significant point that I want to make today in our short time together. For now, before we turn to our second main point, that socialism doesn't produce good results in the real world, I'd like to turn it back to Lori, and she has some announcements, I believe, and the giveaway.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so first of all, like I said, I'm getting a lot out of Laura's teaching. I hope you are too, because I think this is a terribly timely concept, especially being an election year. And it's one of those concepts that you don't normally hear preached from the pulpit. So making biblical connections to a very current and timely topic is always helpful for helping us navigate our current situation. Before we go to that much farther, let me just remind you that we do have a giveaway at the very end of this episode today. So in order to be eligible for the giveaway, which just a reminder, it is a conference ticket for our conference this September. So to be eligible for the giveaway, let us know in the chat why it is that you came to today's segment, to today's episode. What is it about this concept or this topic that drew you? What is it about WIA that maybe made you watch today's episode? Let us know in the chat. We need to know why you're watching today, and you need to be present during the giveaway in the chat toward the end of the show in order to be eligible to receive your conference ticket. So just keep that in mind. As a reminder, we're giving away a free registration to our 2024 WIA conference in September in Nashville. So you will get the option to have a 1-year access to a replay from a past conference. If for any reason you're going to be unable to be in attendance in Nashville this September, you can still have access to a WIA conference, and you'll have a year to access that WIA conference. And so if you've never been to a WIA conference, this is a great opportunity for you to get to know us better and to get to know our conferences better, because honestly, they're very unique. It's truth, logic, worldview, and apologetics by women for women. So I strongly encourage you to be involved. Now, before we hand it back to Laura, I wanted to let you know that there is somebody in our chat who is requesting clarification on your definition of socialism that you used at the opening and the beginning of our episode. Specifically, she wants to know if it's your definition that you created from your own notes and from your own ideas, or if it is a published definition from elsewhere. And so it might be a good opportunity just before you start your second point to just clarify your definition of socialism, just so that the members in our chat will have a better idea of what exactly they're looking at. I think they would find that helpful. So I thought I would just pass that along. So anyway, you're doing a great job. I love the ideas that you have laid out. I think they're very helpful to everyone, and I'm turning it back to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, that's a really good question, because I will. So I was not quoting like a dictionary definition. I was using my words to explain what is presented in the dictionary and in books on socialism and things like that. But I was also I was also trying to help people understand why socialism doesn't just mean that the community just shares everything and things just run themselves and everybody gets the benefits of things just not having it, anyone run them. By showing that it's not practical, it's not realistic, it never happens in reality that that the community owns and runs businesses, and that people just jump in and take responsibility when everybody gets all the fruits of their labor. So I'd be happy to talk more about that as well another time. I just didn't want to go into like a 10-15 minute explanation of that in this short time, but I'd be happy to talk to you if you would like to get in touch with me, because that's a great question. We have to know what we're talking about. And so socialism as in ideology is when the community owns the means of production. In practice, the few who are in power end up taking over. So let's look at point number 2. Socialism depends on several factors that simply do not reflect reality. Okay, socialism doesn't produce good results in the real world is the main point here. Socialism doesn't produce good results in the real world. And one of the reasons for that is because socialism depends on several factors that simply don't reflect reality. So first of all, socialism assumes that people will always give their best, take risks, innovate, and be honest, even when there is no incentive to do so. When the government owns the businesses and predetermines that everyone will make the same amount of money no matter what they do, there's no incentive to work harder and to innovate. And when there's nothing to gain, when there's no incentive, people don't sacrifice personally in order to work hard and take the risks and create better products and services that are necessary for those products and services to exist and to be done well. We should probably expect this result because of the sinfulness of humanity as a result of the fall. By the way, I think that's an absolutely critical, foundational doctrine of Christianity and of truth and of reality, that people are not born inherently good, always seeking to do the right thing, just because we are sinful from conception, and selfish. And we see this practice, lived out, played out when the incentives to do good, to do otherwise, to serve others are taken away. But we don't have to just wonder if this is how it would play out if we were to take away the incentives for people to produce and to do their jobs with excellence, because historical attempts at socialism have all shown what happens. We can know for certain. When individual workers have nothing to gain by doing extra work to attract customers, by doing it well to retain their customers, the work is not done the way it is and needs to be done, and is done when there's an incentive to produce with excellence and to draw in and maintain customers, to meet the needs of others. The result is that fewer products are produced, fewer services are available. Those services which are available are not done as well, and eventually people suffer greatly. Second, socialism assumes that a few very powerful elites can accurately predict what everybody will need and want. Okay, so remember, we no longer have supply and demand determining what is available and how much it costs, but we have a few powerful elites making these decisions, since individuals are not owning the means of production anymore. Since the production of goods and services under socialism is not based on free market indicators, the few powerful people in government decide what is produced, regardless of what customers want, and they decide how much of each good is produced, even though in practice, in reality, no one person or small group of people can ever predict how much of every good and service is needed or wanted by every family in the country, and certainly not in a country the size and diversity of the United States. Therefore, for that reason, historically, there are massive shortages of many goods and services, and there is an overproduction of others. When a few people are in charge and decide how much of everything to produce rather than the free decisions of individuals deciding what and how much is produced. A third assumption of socialism, which does not fit reality, is that socialism assumes that the world's wealth is a fixed amount which cannot be increased. Socialism assumes that in order for some people to gain more wealth, others have to lose wealth. But this simply does not fit with reality. Global wealth has grown exponentially over the past 200 years, especially. If we had just decided to stop incentivizing the creation of new wealth about 200 years ago, and instead just divided up the wealth that existed at that time, we would all be very, very poor today. You cannot fight poverty by dividing up the wealth that currently exists. You fight poverty by training and equipping and incentivizing the creation of new wealth. And history has shown this over and over again. So let me give you an example. Think about your smartphone. If you take all of the components of your phone and evaluate their value, so you think of the plastic, the glass, the copper, all the other little pieces that comprise a smartphone, none of those components would be worth very much at all. I don't value a piece of plastic or a piece of glass. What am I going to do with that? But when an engineer takes those components and puts them together to create a smartphone, then the phone has a lot more value than just the components. So that's an example of how wealth is created. Humans, using their creative ability, organize raw materials into products and services that solve problems for other people. But in order to create wealth, there have to be incentives and there have to be opportunities, neither of which exist under socialism. So the necessary assumptions upon which socialism is founded do not match with reality, and therefore socialism continuously results in great harm through large-scale poverty, sickness, and even widespread death. So some of the most socialist countries in the world right now are Venezuela, Cuba, and North Korea. So it's important to look at how they're doing. The Index of Economic Freedom is an annual report from the Heritage Foundation that measures all countries according to their economic freedom. So basically, it measures how capitalist an economy is. What we find is that the countries with the greatest economic freedom are the wealthiest countries, while socialist countries are very poor. So for example, Singapore and Switzerland are the two economically freest countries in the world right now. And they have a very high per capita GDP. People are very, very wealthy in those countries. They live very, very well there. And then you have socialist countries like Venezuela and Cuba at the very bottom of the index of economic freedom. They're socialist and they are extremely poor countries. Now, Venezuela actually used to be very wealthy. They have tremendous natural resources, but then they became socialist and they became extremely poor. My husband spent some time there a couple of years ago, and the accounts that he brought back and the accounts that have been shared by others who were there and on the news and etc. Are just horrifying. People ate their own pets to stay alive, and then they ate the zoo animals, and then they did everything imaginable to try to get out of the country. My husband actually brought back some art that I want, I call it inflation art, that he brought back, and I'd like to show you all. This is some sort of bird. I should probably know what it's called, but it is art that is made of Venezuelan money. So if you could see these individual pieces of paper, these are actually bills. This is money from Venezuela. $100, not dollars, they use bolivars, 200 bolivar bills, 500 bolivar bills, and even bigger. And the reason people took their bills, their money, and made paper birds out of them is because the bills became worth absolutely nothing under socialism due to inflation. So this bird now is worth a lot more than all of these bills that were combined to make it. And there are examples like that all over the place. I actually have a collection of bills from around the world where socialism has been tried and where inflation has gotten out of control. And I've got $50 billion bills from countries, and yet they can probably buy me a Coca-Cola. As for another example, Chile, the country of Chile, used to be very poor, but then it became capitalist and it became very wealthy through those economic policies. These are not anomalies. I'm not just picking and choosing these just a few anomalies. Historically, millions of people die unnecessarily in the years following the adoption of socialism through starvation, through slavery, through imprisonment, even through execution. And we can understand why if we understand how socialism works in practice. Socialist governments seize private property, private businesses, and those businesses stop producing what people need. So you get famines, you get blackouts, you get loss of other essential services. And we see that in the world today, even on a small scale, when countries that don't go fully socialist just adopt socialistic policies in individual industries. So I'll give you a few examples. In South Africa, they recently nationalized power and then started having regular blackouts. Venezuela nationalized the petroleum industry, and now they have a shortage of oil and gas in Venezuela. Canada nationalized their healthcare system, and now a substantial percentage of their population is on a waiting list to see a doctor, while countless others cross the border into the US so they can see a doctor without having to wait years or up to a year or more to see a doctor. Without the US here, Canada would be in even more trouble with their nationalized healthcare system. Some people will say, or people will often say to me, okay, yes, but we don't want to be like, Venezuela. We don't want to be like Cuba. That's not what we're talking about. We want to be socialist like Denmark and Norway and Sweden. The problem is those are not socialist countries. Those are free market economies with very high tax rates and large welfare programs, which are only possible because of their capitalism, because of their free market economies. We can point you to more information on that, and I've talked a lot more about that in other places. But the fact is that 90% of the wealth in Scandinavian countries is privately owned. 90%. Prices are not regulated. There are no minimum wage laws there. They have a free, open stock market. Private property is guaranteed by law. The government can't take it away. And citizens' savings are fully private and free of government control. And you can see this reflected in the index of economic freedom that I referred to earlier, which uses measures like financial freedom, freedom of trade and investment, property rights, the tax burden, business freedom, and government integrity to determine how free each country is. So if you look at the index for 2023, you'll see that Denmark is ranked number 9 in the world in economic freedom. Sweden is ranked number 10, Finland number 11, Norway number 12. The US, guess where the US is? If Denmark's 9, Sweden 10, Finland 11, Norway 12. The US is 25. We don't have as much of a free economy as Scandinavian countries do. Of course, Venezuela is 174 out of 176 countries, Cuba 175 out of 176, and North Korea dead last in 176th place in economic freedom. Of course, there are also some countries, mostly Muslim countries, that did not report, which are also quite unfree and poor. So I mentioned, though, that the Scandinavian countries do have large government entitlement programs. But I think it's important to note that these programs are not free. Basically, if you want the government to give big benefits, big entitlements, then you have to give them most of your income so they can afford to pay for it. Somebody has to pay for things. And it's not just the rich who must pay. We hear this frequently in the US. Well, if the rich would just pay their fair share, then we could have all the free stuff that we want. In reality, it's the poor and the middle class who pay by far the largest percentage of their income to the government for these programs in countries where these programs work, where they exist, such as the Scandinavian countries. The Scandinavians know, and they acknowledge, their leaders acknowledge regularly and publicly, that they have to incentivize innovation and high productivity from the upper class in order to keep those people innovating and earning. So it is the poor and the middle class who pay for these big government programs. Additional results of socialism that I would love for all of you to look into. We'll recommend some resources here at the end, but I've talked about quite a bit elsewhere, is socialism by necessity and by design leads to secularism, loss of religious freedom. It leads to declining marriage and birth rates. It consistently leads to declining church attendance. It leads to declining charitable giving, and it results in declining Christian resources, of course, that are available in those places. Now, none of these align with any values that Jesus ever expressed. These are the opposite of what Jesus wanted for his people. These results can be seen in full-on socialist countries, of course, but they can actually also be seen in countries that have implemented some socialistic policies without becoming completely socialist, like Canada and many Western European countries, as I mentioned before. The reality is that when Christians aren't able to keep the money that they earn, it's much harder for them to start Christian organizations, to fund those organizations, to give to Christian organizations. And it's harder for Christians, significantly harder for Christians to live out their Christian worldview. Socialist systems are focused on, by necessity, by design, on producing material outcomes. They don't produce Christian missionaries, Christian apologists, Christian authors. Christianity is actually a rival to the power of socialist leaders, because Christians believe that we are accountable to God and to his statutes first and foremost, which usually conflicts with the demands of a secular government. And so wherever socialism increases, the silencing of Christians increases as well. Okay, so wherever socialism has been tried, it has resulted in greater levels of poverty and secularism. When it's full-on incorporated into every aspect of life, it often results in pervasive famines, death, widespread misery. But we also have to ask the question, well, is there a better alternative? I mean, we can't just think up ideas that exist in fantasy land, but not in real life. Well, this might be interesting to you. This when I first discovered this, I couldn't believe it, but looked into it. It's amazing. Since 1970, the percentage of humanity living in extreme poverty has fallen by 80%. Since 1970, extreme poverty has fallen by 80%. Before 1970, more than 1 in 4 people around the world were living on $1 a day or less. Today, that's about 1 in 20 people around the world. And this did not happen because of handouts or because of government planning. According to Arthur Brooks, the president of the American Enterprise Institute, this happened because of globalization, free trade, property rights, the rule of law, and entrepreneurship. These are all essential components of a free market economy, and they are all incompatible with socialism. So you may say, okay, well, a free market economy is preferable for minimizing poverty. Sure, but isn't socialism a more moral system? I have a lot to say about that. But let me start with, all systems are comprised of sinful people, of course, and no economic system will ever eliminate sin. However, some systems channel people's sin toward productivity and create a situation in which there are greater incentives and opportunities to do what is right and good, while other systems destroy productivity and opportunities. So let me just list a few things that a moral economic system does. A moral economic system rewards people for meeting the needs of others. So even if those people who have selfish motives if they're driven by selfishness, then for their own good, for their own selfish good, the incentive is for them to serve others, to be productive for others, to meet the needs of others, to benefit others. A moral economic system will promote innovation and hard work because people get to keep what they earn. It'll promote honesty, integrity, courtesy, excellence, so that because when clients have a choice about whether to return or go elsewhere, you want your customers to return, of course. A moral system will allow people to give money to charity and to do so voluntarily, not by force. It'll provide an environment in which Christianity is permitted to thrive, not forced upon people, but permitted to thrive. A moral economic system promotes a peaceful and harmonious society by allowing individuals the freedom to pursue their own interests and beliefs, convictions, preferences. It'll promote creativity and beauty and innovation by allowing people the freedom to do what they love and the incentive for them to do it with excellence, rather than telling people what they have to do in order to meet a government-imposed quota. A moral system will promote wise stewardship of the environment. Socialist societies have consistently been the most destructive to the environment. If you have any doubts about that, check out China for one. That's where I would recommend you start. A moral economic system allows people to achieve earned success, and it's earned success that actually makes people happier rather than being dependent on handouts. And actually, Arthur Brooks did a study and writes about it in his book, Who Really Cares?, in which it was found that people who were earning their success were happier than people dependent on handouts, even when the people who were earning their success had less money than the people on welfare. We were created and designed to work and to be productive. A moral economic system will honor the dignity and the worth of human beings by offering greater freedom and protection of human rights. None of these factors describe a socialist system. Every single one of these moral values is incompatible with socialism and yet present in a free market economy. So as I prepare to close here, I just want to answer the most common objection I get to a free market economy, and that is, well, what about inequality? Okay, I've already touched on this a bit, but isn't inequality unfair? Socialism makes things equal for everyone. Few thoughts here to close. Socialism makes the very few powerful elites wealthy, and it makes everyone else poor. That is not equality. Also, greater wealth for all people actually comes with greater wealth inequalities. Okay, greater wealth disparities. When everybody is wealthier, there are greater wealth inequalities. So we have to choose. Do we want equal poverty for the masses, or do we want wealth for the masses with inequalities as part of the deal? If you'd rather we all be poor together than someone else have more than you have, that is likely a spiritual problem. So, for example, when tech companies invented smartphones, again, back to the smartphones, okay, we could all be more productive now. So we can all make more money. We all have more wealth as a result of smartphones. Yes, the people who invented them, created them, they became wealthier as a result of smartphones than I became as a result of a smartphone, because they did the hard work. They took the risks. They created products that other people found to be valuable. And then people like me purchased them of my own free will. And we have all become wealthier and benefited from their innovation. Two more thoughts on the inequality issue. In a free market economy, people are constantly moving up into wealthier quartiles throughout their lives. The list of richest people, for example, is always changing. Hard work is being rewarded. Under socialism, the poor remain poor throughout their lives. If you're not born into the small elite circle, you will remain at a poverty level, and there's nothing they can do about it. And finally, and I think this is a valuable point to end on, if we are envious, again, if we are envious of others' wealth, the biblical answer is repentance and gratefulness, not sabotage of our economy. We may need to be reminded often to be grateful for what we have. And we probably need to be reminded that whatever we have, if you were living in the West or in a free market economy in 2024, you almost certainly have far, far more than what just about anyone else ever had in the history of the world, thanks to free market economies. If you'd like to read more about this, we have a list of recommended resources on the Women in Apologetics webpage, and under a heading that I believe is Policy and Economics, or Economics and Policy. We've put several great resources there. And I appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you all at the conference.
Thank you, Laura. I don't know about you guys, but I love this topic. I love this topic because there's so much confusion in the Bible. If we understand the Bible, there really is so much clarity. And it's so important for the next generation to understand a biblical view of our economics and political systems. I would love to keep talking about this, but I have announcements, so I have to move on. But we are very excited to be giving away a registration, as you already know, to our 2024 WIA conference. So if you are unable to attend in person, don't worry. You can still be a part of the giveaway. We were going to give you the option to have a year's access to a replay from one of our past conferences. And so we have a winner, and our winner she's watching on YouTube. Her name is Celeste Mosens. Celeste, I'm so excited for you. This conference is going to be such a good conference this year. Please hop into our chat and let our moderators know that you are still here, and they will connect with you and get you the information that you need to get you all set up. So congratulations, Celeste. I am very much looking forward to seeing you in Nashville, if at all possible. So, okay, so this year, as we've already mentioned a couple of times, our 2024 WIA conference is in September in Nashville, and Laura is going to be one of our breakout speakers, and she and I both would love to see you there for that particular conference. So, you'll get the opportunity at our conference, as always, to build community around like-minded topics and a common interest for us as women, as Christian women. If you would like to learn more about Laura and An Affair with Reason, which is her blog, you can find her website at laurazpowell.org, and you can follow her on X at Laura Z. Powell. So don't forget that our next discussion next month answers the question, what is a woman? Our guest will be Sarah Stonestreet, who leads the Strong Woman podcast through the Colson Center, and will also be joining us at the conference as a keynote speaker. So if you are interested in the conference, you should really check in next month to get a sneak preview of Sarah Stone Street talking about what is a woman. And as usual, you can learn more about women in apologetics by going to our website at womeninapologetics.com and by following us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and of course, here on YouTube at Women in Apologetics. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you never miss a Voices of WIA episode or any of our video resources. So thank you so much for joining us today. As always, we love having you here. We love having you at Women in Apologetics. We love talking to you and getting to know you. And if you would like to help Women in Apologetics, our biggest need is monthly key partners. And when someone joins as a key partner or an ambassador to our ministry, when you support our ministry in that way, we have a brand new thing called the Apologetics Collective. So that becomes an option to you to get some behind the scenes, to get to know us a little better, and that gives us the opportunity to serve you more personally and more relevantly through our Apologetics Collective. So you can find out all about that on our website by becoming a key partner or an ambassador. Thank you so much for helping us to continue to bring women into the fold of apologetics and serve you by learning to love the Lord with your mind and all of your heart and all of your soul. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next month with Sarah Stone Street at answering the question, what is a woman? We'll see you next time.